For April 14th, 1912. The North Atlantic is calm, uncannily calm. The sea lies flat like glass, the sky stretched wide and empty above it. No wind, no waves, just a cold, endless stillness. Cutting through that silence is the largest moving object on Earth, the RMS Titanic, a ship so vast, so advanced, so confidently engineered that many believed it could never truly be lost. On board are over 2,000 people. Some are among the richest in the world, industrialists, aristocrats, names that carry weight in London, New York, and beyond. They dine beneath chandeliers, walk polished decks, and speak of business, politics, and the future. Below them, in third class, families travel with everything they own. They carry hopes of new lives, new countries, new beginnings. For many, this journey is not just a crossing, it's a chance at something better. And then there are the crew. Men who know the sea, men who've seen danger before, men who understand that the ocean does not care how large a ship is or how confident the people aboard it may be. At 11:40 p.m., a lookout spots something ahead. Not a storm, not another ship. Ice. What happens next will last just over 2 hours. It will become one of the most famous disasters in human history. Because the story of the Titanic is not just about a ship sinking. It's about certainty meeting reality, about class meeting chaos, and about a world on the edge of change, still believing, even in 1912, that progress had no limits. This is the story of the night that belief began to crack. This is the sinking of the RMS Titanic. To understand how a ship like the Titanic could be lost, you have to go back, before the iceberg, before the warnings, before the calm Atlantic night, to the mindset that built her. At the turn of the 20th century, the world was changing fast. Industry was booming, technology was advancing at a pace never seen before. Steel, electricity, global trade, everything seemed to point in one direction, forward. And nowhere was that confidence more visible than in great ocean liners. For decades, shipping companies had competed for speed. The fastest crossing of the Atlantic was a matter of national pride. By the early 1900s, a new idea began to take hold. If you couldn't be the fastest, you could be the most luxurious. Enter the White Star Line. Their plan wasn't to dominate with speed, but with size, comfort, and prestige. They would build ships so grand that crossing the Atlantic wouldn't feel like a journey. It would feel like a floating palace. The result was a new class of liner, Olympic, Titanic, and Britannic. And among them, the Titanic stood as the crown jewel. She was over 800 feet long, taller than most buildings of her time, powered by enormous engines divided into watertight compartments designed to keep her afloat even if parts of the hull break. To the public, she represented something bigger than a ship. She represented certainty. Newspapers called her practically unsinkable, not because she couldn't be damaged, because it was believed she could survive anything the ocean could reasonably throw at her. And that belief mattered, because it shaped decisions, it shaped confidence, and, as we'll see, it shaped the way people reacted when things started to go wrong. By April 1912, the Titanic was ready, a symbol of progress, a triumph of engineering, and without anyone realizing it, a disaster waiting for the smallest mistake. On April 10th, she left Southampton, her destination, New York. Her passengers, the rich, the hopeful, the ordinary, and the crew tasked with guiding them safely across the most unforgiving ocean in the world. For 4 days, the voyage was almost perfect, and that may have been part of the problem. By the evening of April 14th, The Titanic had already received multiple warnings, wireless messages from other ships, short, routine notes reporting ice in the North Atlantic, pack ice, growlers, large bergs drifting further south than expected for that time of year. They weren't unusual. Ships crossing this route often encountered ice in April. What mattered was how much and where. Some of these warnings were passed along to the bridge. Others never made it beyond the wireless room, where operators were busy sending passengers messages to shore. The system wasn't built for urgency, it was built for communication. And so the information came in fragments. Important, but not alarming. On the bridge, Captain Edward Smith and his officers adjusted slightly, altering course just enough to move further south, but they did not slow the ship. The Titanic continued at near full speed, around 22 knots. Fast enough to keep schedule, fast enough to maintain the image of control. Above deck, the night grew colder, unusually cold. Passengers noticed it in different ways. Through the bite in the air, the stillness of the sea, the absence of waves breaking against the hull. To experienced sailors, that stillness was not comforting. It was dangerous. Without waves, there were no white water breaking at the base of the icebergs, no visual warnings until you were almost upon them. And there was something else. The moon had set early. The sky was clear, full of stars, but the ocean below was pitch black. No horizon, no contrast, just darkness. Up in the crow's nest, two lookouts, Frederick Fleet and Reginald Lee, scanned the horizon with the naked eye. They had no binoculars, locked away, misplaced, unavailable. It hardly mattered now. What mattered was that they were watching a black ocean for something darker still. Minute after minute passed, nothing, until, just before 11:40 p.m., Fleet saw it. A shape, not moving, not breaking, just there. He rang the bell once, twice, 3 times, and picked up the phone to the bridge. Iceberg, right ahead. On the bridge, First Officer William Murdoch reacted instantly. Hard a starboard! Engines reversed. A massive ship, responding as quickly as it could, but not quickly enough, because at that speed, at that distance, time had already run out. There's no great crash, no thunderous explosion, just a sensation, subtle, almost confusing. A long, drawn-out shudder passes through the ship, like metal brushing against something it shouldn't. A faint vibration underfoot. Then, nothing. For many passengers, it barely registers. In the first-class lounge, conversations pause for a moment, then resume. In cabins, people look up briefly, then carry on. Some step into corridors, asking quietly, "Did you feel that?" Up on the deck, a few notice fragments of ice scattered across the forward well deck. Small chunks, no bigger than fists. Almost harmless. Almost. Below the waterline, it's a very different story. The iceberg hasn't smashed into the Titanic. It has scraped along her starboard side, opening a series of narrow slits across multiple compartments. Not one fatal wound, but several smaller ones, spread out. Water begins to pour in. Fast. Cold. Relentless. Within minutes, the forward compartments are flooding. Engineers and stokers, deep within the ship, at first they understand what's happening. They hear it before they see it. The rush of water, the change in pressure, the sound no ship should ever make. Up above, Captain Smith arrives on the bridge. Questions come quickly. Answers come slowly. What did we hit? How bad is it? Is the ship in danger? The truth begins to form not in panic, but in calculation. Thomas Andrews, the ship's designer, is brought in to assess the damage. He moves through the lower decks, seeing the flooding for himself, measuring it against what the ship was built to withstand. The Titanic can stay afloat with 4 compartments flooding, maybe 5 at a stretch. But this is 6. Perhaps more. When Andrews returns, he doesn't hesitate. The ship will sink, not immediately, not in minutes, but in time. An hour and a half, 2 at most. Above the deck, the night remains perfectly still. The stars are still out, the sea is still calm. And for most people on board, nothing has changed. But below them, the ocean is already inside the ship. And it is not going to leave. Sorry, I've got a bit of a cold. At first, the response is controlled, measured, quiet. There is no rush of panic, no screaming crowds. Instead, stewards move through corridors, knocking on cabin doors. Life jackets on, just a precaution. Passengers emerge, some amused, some mildly irritated at the interruption. Many are told to head up to the boat deck. Few are told why. Up above, the lifeboats are uncovered. One by one, there are only 20 of them. Enough for just over half the people on board. At the time, this doesn't seem like a problem. Regulations had been followed. The ship exceeded the legal requirement. And besides, this is the Titanic. The belief still lingers that these boats are temporary measures. Ferries to another ship, perhaps. Not a final escape. Crew members begin organising passengers, women and children first. It's a rule, part tradition, part instinct, not always enforced perfectly, but repeated often enough to shape behaviour. And still, there is hesitation. Some passengers don't want to leave the ship. It feels safer, warmer, more solid beneath their feet than a small wooden boat being lowered into black, freezing ocean. Others simply don't understand the danger. So the first lifeboats go down half empty. Dozens of empty seats drifting away from a ship that is already dying. Down below, the situation is worsening. Water continues to fill the forward compartments, pulling the bow lower and lower into the sea. The angle is slight at first, barely noticeable, but it's there. A tilt, a shift, something no one can quite ignore no more. In the wireless room, Jack Phillips and Harold Bride are sending messages into the night. CQD, come quick, danger. Then a newer signal, SOS. Distress calls bounce across the Atlantic. Some ships respond, some are too far away. One, the Californian, is close to the most, but silent. Its wireless operator, off duty. Time is slipping. Boat after boat is lowered, some orderly, some chaotic. Each one carrying a small piece of the ship's population into the darkness, away from the light, the music, the illusion of safety. And still, many remain. Because for all the evidence now visible, the tilt, the cold, the lifeboats disappearing into the sea, there is one belief that hasn't fully broken yet. That a ship like the Titanic cannot really sink. Not completely. Not tonight. But the ocean doesn't share that belief. And it's rising, deck by deck. By now, the change is undeniable. The bow is lower, the deck slopes just enough for people to feel it as they walk. Doors swing slightly on their hinges. Loose objects begin to slide. The ship is no longer pretending, and neither are the crew. The order is given more firmly now. Women and children to the boats. Officers begin to raise their voices. Some draw revolvers, not to threaten, but to enforce a kind of order against the growing confusion. Time is running out. The lifeboats are being lowered faster, but there are still not enough. Not nearly enough. In first class, some men step back, helping their wives and children into the boats, forcing a calm they don't feel. In second and third class, the situation is more uneven. Language barriers, locked gates, and simple confusion slow people down. Not everyone even knows where to go, and the ship continues to sink. Water reaches the lower decks fully now, swallowing corridors, flooding cabins, pushing air upward with a dull, echoing force. The sound is different, less like a leak, more like something taking control. Up on deck, the band is still playing. No one knows exactly what song comes last, but survivors remember the music. Steady, deliberate, almost defiant. Not to stop the panic, but to delay it. To give people something to hold onto as everything else begins to fall apart. Lifeboat after lifeboat disappears into the darkness. The gaps between them grow longer. Fewer options, fewer chances. The tilt increases. Now it's visible, obvious. People begin to move uphill, towards the stern, drawn instinctively to the highest point as the bow sinks deeper into the Atlantic. And then at some point, quietly but unmistakably, the belief finally breaks. The ship is going down. There is no rescue coming in time, no hidden strength left in its design, no miracle. Just cold water, rising higher. Panic begins to spread, not all at once, but in waves. Some run, some freeze, some cling to routine, refusing to accept what's happening even as it unfolds around them. And above it all, the night remains eerily unchanged. The stars still burn overhead. The sea is still flat, black, endless. As if nothing of importance is happening at all. But on the deck of the Titanic, everything is collapsing. Order, certainty, and time itself, leaving only one question that now matters. What do you do when there is nowhere left to go? By 2 a.m., the Titanic is no longer a ship in any meaningful sense of the word. It is an angle, a structure half alive, half surrendering to the sea. The stern rises higher as the bow disappears completely beneath the Atlantic, pulling the vessel into a posture no ship was ever meant to take. Steel groans under the stresses it was never designed to feel. Rivets strain, plates twist. Inside, electricity begins to fail in sections. Lights flicker, then return, then flicker again. Each time the ship feels more temporary, less like a monument to engineering, more like something slowly being erased. On the boat deck, the remaining lifeboats are now being lowered into a different world entirely. The sea below is no longer calm. It's filled with voices, splashes, confusion. Boats already in the water trying to pull away from the ship as it changes shape above them. And still people remain on board. Some because there is nowhere left to go. Some because they cannot bring themselves to leave. And some because they are waiting for an order, for certainty, something that will make sense of what is happening. But nothing comes. In the final moments, the Titanic becomes almost vertical, the stern pointing into the sky, lights burning along its length like a line being pulled upward out of the world. People cling to railings, to fittings, to anything that holds. The ocean below does not pause. It simply rises to meet them. And then there is a sound. Not one sound, really. A sequence, a collapse, a tearing that seems to come from everywhere at once. The ship breaks, not cleanly, not neatly, but catastrophically. Steel and structure giving way under forces no design ever truly accounted for. For a brief moment, everything changes, and then it is gone. The Titanic disappears beneath the surface of the North Atlantic, taking with it its lights, its noise, and its illusion of permanence. And what remains is silence. Dark water, and lifeboats scattered across the ocean like small, fragile islands of survival. But the story does not end at the sinking, because in the cold hours that follow, survival becomes its own kind of struggle. The cries from water begins to fade. The boats drift farther apart, and the ocean, vast, indifferent, unchanging, continues as it always has, as if nothing at all has happened. But for those who were there, nothing will ever be the same again. In the aftermath of the sinking, news of the Titanic did not spread slowly. It detonated across the world. By the time survivors reached New York, the story was already forming in newspapers, telegrams, and shocked conversations on both sides of the Atlantic. And what people struggled with most was not the scale of the disaster, but the idea that it had happened at all. The ship described as unsinkable had sunk, and in doing so, it left behind something larger than wreckage. Left a question the world has never really stopped asking. How could so much confidence fail so completely? Almost immediately, the Titanic stopped being just an event and became a story. Newspapers shaped narratives of heroism and tragedy. First-class sacrifice, band music on the deck, the stoic discipline of officers. Some of it was true, some of it was simplified, and some of it became exaggerated over time. Disaster was too large to process as raw fact alone. It needed structure, meaning, characters, and so it began to turn into a legend. In the decades that followed, writers returned again and again to the sinking, not just to describe it, but to interpret it. It became a symbol of technological overconfidence, rigid social class structures, the fragility of human control over nature. Books about the Titanic are rarely just about the ship. They're about what the ship represents. A modern world discovering that progress does not remove risks, it can sometimes amplify it. No medium has shaped the Titanic's legacy more than film. From early silent reconstructions to later historical dramas, filmmakers were drawn to the same contrast, luxury and disaster existing in the same frame. And in the modern era, one film in particular reshaped the public imagination entirely, turning the Titanic into a global cultural reference point, especially for younger generations who knew the story before they ever learned the history. But beyond any single film, the pattern remains consistent. Every retelling re-emphasizes the same core tension: human certainty versus natural indifference. For most of the 20th century, the Titanic remained a story of memory. Then in 1985, the wreck was found on the seabed of the North Atlantic, resting in two broken sections nearly 4 kilometres below the surface. Suddenly, the story became physical again. The ship was no longer only history. It was an object you could see, map, and study. And in the 21st century, that connection has only deepened. Advanced underwater imaging has revealed new details of the wreck. Documentaries have reconstructed the sinking with increasing precision. Ethical debates have emerged around exploitation, salvage, and preservation. The Titanic has become something unusual in modern history, a disaster that is still being actively studied, not just remembered. More than a century later, the Titanic endures not because it was the largest ship of its time, or because it sank in a dramatic fashion, but because it represents something broader. It's a case study in confidence without full understanding. Systems that fail quietly until they fail completely, and the way societies turn tragedy into meaning. It's also, crucially, a reminder history is not just about what happened, but about how close we came to remember it. Because the Titanic did not only sink in 1912, it's been rebuilt in films, rewritten in books, debated by historians, and reimagined by every generation since. And in that sense, it has never truly disappeared. It simply changed form, from a ship into a story the world still cannot stop telling. And that is where we leave the Titanic, not at the bottom of the Atlantic, but in the way it continues to surface in our memory. Because history like this doesn't really end. It shifts from eyewitness accounts to archives to films to the way we talk about it today. If you take anything from this episode, let it be this: disasters are rarely about a single moment. They are built from decisions, assumptions, confidence, and silence, long before the final impact. Thank you for listening. And next time we'll step into another moment where history changed course, and the world had to live with it. Goodbye.